All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Raising Confident Athletes in the Digital Age. We are on episode 4. So thank you to everyone who's continuously tuning in. Jeff and I are here with a special guest today, Dave Cudmore of Fellsway Wanderers. Hi, Dave.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Want to tell us a bit about what you do at Fellsway, but beyond Fellsway, just your background, who you are?
Yeah, so for Fellsway, I have, other than coaching, I obviously coach teams. I have two main roles, and it's Director of Culture and Business Development. The business development side is I help build relationships with people like Jeff, basically to come in and help us build complete people, right? Not just athletes. There's 5 pillars of soccer: technical, tactical, which is the soccer, right? Physical, which is the skill of strength; psychological, which is Jeff, right? And social is the culture piece. And that's my other role, where our soccer is directed by Vinny, right? What we do on the soccer field when it comes to the technical and tactical, I actually work with the coaches to make sure we implement a common culture throughout all the teams and all of the club. And that's a piece of what we'll here to talk about today, basically, is one of those culture pieces that we try to work on.
Yes, and you're also a father, correct?
Yes, I have 3 children. I have 2 boys in the military, and a daughter who plays college soccer in Vermont. So
Yeah.
I've done the whole parent soccer thing through most of my life. I realized this week that I actually have nothing to do on Labor Day weekend this year. So my wife and I are going camping for the first free Labor Day weekend in about, I don't know, 18 years, I think.
Yeah, my parents are the same way. So we're actually going to talk today a lot about how we have implemented what Jeff and I talk about a lot on this podcast into Fellsway Wanderers, but I think it'd also be useful even just in our own lives, as I know, like 3 people who probably have failed a lot. I've lost a lot of soccer games in my day, and I'm better off for it and not always gotten what I wanted on or off the field. And I think we can talk about our personal experience and talk about how we've learned from that and how we now implement it to help the next generation.
When I was listening to the second episode, Jeff talked about resilience and the lack of resilience in a lot of kids in particular that we talk about. And so one of the pieces we implement in the culture side is I call it the gift of failure, which isn't my term. It's a book by an author named Jessica Lahey. I personally have not read the book. I've listened to her on multiple podcasts, and it very much ties into what we do, even though it's a parenting book. And it's basically, we let the kids make mistakes. And to me, soccer is an extremely unique sport in the United States, where it's still player driven. The players make decisions on the fields. They're not actually given plays to run like American football, lacrosse, basketball. They're kind of turned into robots. Whereas a soccer field, whether a kid penetrates by dribbling or shooting or taking a player on 1v1 or passing, it's really their decision. The coach has nothing to say about it in that game. And there's too many coaches out there who are sitting there yelling, joysticking, we call it, telling kids what to do, where sitting back and letting them themselves figure out where that boundary is. Where am I successful? Where am I not successful? Is extremely helpful in not only the game but in life, because they realize they can push limits, make a mistake, and recover from it, basically. So that's a high level, what we do in the gift of failure, I think, is a perfect term to use for that.
Yeah, so the main way that you would say that we give them this gift of failure is by letting them get on the field and figure it out themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly. So a story I tell often is I was Coach Whitney, who some of people who listen to this know. She and I were coaching a girls 2011 team a long time ago together. And we were trying to get the kids to basically use their goalkeeper as an outlet, right? If you're under pressure, pass the ball back to your goalkeeper. And we were trying to get this particular girl to do it over and over and over again, and she just wouldn't do it. In one game, she finally did. She passed the ball back to the goalkeeper, and it wasn't a particularly nice field. And the ball bounced really funny, and actually the goalkeeper missed it, and it went to the goal. And Whitney and I yelling, yes, Zoe, that's exactly what we want you to do. That was perfect. That's exactly what we need you to do. And the other coach literally looked at us and goes, we scored, right? So his focus was on the result, where our focus was on she did the right thing, even though it didn't turn out right.
Right.
Right. Because if we had yelled at her, she never would have tried it again,
Yeah.
which would have been counterproductive for what we were trying to accomplish. So supporting the attempt is what we're really trying to do, right? The idea was correct, or maybe it wasn't correct, but they come off the field and then we'll go, okay, what did you see and what made you lead to that decision? And were there other things you could have done, right? Don't tell them what to do, but ask them and try to get out of them if they saw other options. Sometimes they don't. They were very focused and that's the only thing they saw. And then maybe that means next time they'll get their head up and look around a little bit, right? So, letting the kids make mistakes is huge. And you can't be focused on results if you're going to let kids make mistakes, right? Which is obviously a huge thing in Fellsway, right? And I know Jeff and I have talked about this a million times.
Something I've learned or seen from the two best coaches in my life, you and my dad, was both at halftime. It was always, what did we do well and what didn't we do well? It was never, here's what we did, here's what we didn't do. But I also think it is important to recognize that we aren't sending kids out on the field blind. It's more of give them all the tools that they can possibly have to succeed in their toolbox, and practices and all the other stuff. And then on game day, let them go and figure it out and figure out what to use and how to use it. And I think we can apply that to life as well. And parenting, and remembering that Jeff said it 1,000 times, you don't set up the world for your kid. You can't prevent them from getting hurt. You can't prevent all these things in the world, but you can set your kid up to go out and succeed in the world.
Yeah, I mean, Kathryn, you and I talked about this the other day. I think it's psychologically very difficult for parents to allow their kids to fail, right? Our instinct is to protect them, right? Dive under them when they fall. Sitting back and letting them fall is hard, right? And so there's another piece we work with parents is try to get them to understand that we don't need to win every game, right? We're building something over time, and this is a process that takes a long time. It's like building a soccer player is not that different than building an adult, right? You make mistakes, and soccer field's nice because none of these mistakes are really life altering, right? The result at the end of the game doesn't really change anything, even if I make a mistake. And every kid makes a mistake. Every coach makes a mistake. Every parent makes a mistake. And we got to be okay with doing that, right? And be able to bounce back from it, which I know Jeff talks about all the time.
Yeah, well, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but you do say I think in this current generation, there's probably a lack of resilience in the children where there hasn't been in the past. In the past, it's been kids are resilient, kids will bounce back. But does that come from the lack of parents and even coaches and teachers like allowing the kids to fail? Is that where that lack of resilience comes from?
I think before you get to those behaviors on the parts of coaches and parents where they're all focused on results and failure is not okay, you have to look at what's changed in the culture during your lifetime, Kathryn. And I've said this on this podcast, I call it the overwhelming tragedy list, which is now lately the Afghanistan thing is going on, COVID's going on, global warming's ramping up, the grown-ups can't get along, the opiate epidemic, the phone addiction is ginormous. So all this stuff is going on. And I think that any parent over the age of 30, 35 was raised where failure was okay, where you went out and played till the streetlights came on. When I ask parents the biggest difference between their kids' lives and their own lives, oh yeah, we weren't overscheduled. We rode our bikes. We fell down. We got up. We skinned our knee. We were okay. We rubbed dirt on it, whatever the expressions were. My father used to say, go play in traffic. And when I got old enough, I thought, oh, he just means you'll be fine. Go out. You'll be fine. So the prevailing message was you'll be fine. This generation of parents, even though they say, yeah, I played till the streetlights came, they raise their children differently because they think the world is less safe. Abductions are on the decline, if that's what we're worried about. In other words, we've let this new parenting playbook overtake us, right? And this soccer club is one little bastion in a sea of I'm working with Northeastern men's soccer right now. I'm going down there today, actually. And these kids, when they make a mistake on the soccer field, these are the fittest athletes of the D1 soccer kids. Like you would think that they would have a ton of confidence. But so parents need to take a look in the mirror and think, wait a minute, why am I raising my kids so differently than the way I was raised? To me, that's the key. If you're home listening, really think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think we can even think about and give some advice on how the parents can implement this gift of failure parenting strategy into the home, even because I know some people who listen to this podcast probably aren't all members of our soccer club or aren't all able to be, don't all have kids who play soccer, but it is interesting to think about. We have this strong community that is doing these awesome things, but how can we slowly start to change things around us, slowly help the parents to bring this back into the home, so this is more of something that is built into our culture.
I can tell one story from when I was a kid, and I remember it distinctly. Is I basically told my mother that I was going to climb up this tree and onto the roof, right, the house, check it out. And I remember my mother going, "Yeah, I don't think that's a very good idea, but yeah, good luck, right? Have at it." So I climbed the tree and got on the roof, and then realized there's no way for me to get down. Right? I couldn't get down, so I sat on the roof for a while, and then called my mother and was like, "Can you go get the ladder so I can get off the roof?" Which she reminded me, goes, "Yeah, I didn't think that was a good idea, but you sorted it out, right?" And I think it's just really hard for people to just, again, let their kids fall. Let them make mistakes. And the piece on the soccer field, it's hard for us to get the parents to buy into this. Eventually they all do. I think they all do. They seem to. I don't get too much pushback when we make a mistake. But that it takes a lot of talking to bend that. What's important now, that's our win, right? What's important now is an acronym, away from results, which you can't control, into the process, which you can. And that's what we're basically trying to do. That's a huge piece of the culture. There's a million pieces. I can come on here every week and we could talk about a different piece of the culture. But I think this is one of the most important ones, is that when parents leave the field on a 4-0 or 5-0 or a 3-2 whatever it may be, knowing that maybe your kid made the bad pass that caused the winning goal against your team, that's okay. I try to tell all the parents that the only thing they're allowed to say to their children within 24 hours after the end of a match is, "I love to watch you play." Right? That's all you're allowed to say. No matter what they say, all you say, "I love to watch you play." Because if you start analyzing it, they take a different message from that. The parents' intentions are good, but the kids process that information, I think, just completely different. Like often we see a kid make a mistake on the field, they don't look at us. They look across the other touchline to see what their parents are doing. Right.
Yeah, right. And I think what we've talked about is what you've found within we've been around about a year now, is that it's the parents who have the trouble not winning, not the kids. Your kids don't care about results essentially unless you do. So even the ones who maybe give you some pushback and say that, "Oh, they do. It's because they've learned that's what's good from the parent. That's what gets a positive reaction versus losing gets a negative reaction.
That's what gets you ice cream, right?
Yeah.
Score a goal, you get ice cream, right? Win
Yeah.
the game, you get ice cream. And, there's all kinds of studies out there. We won't have to rehash them, but if you look at the reason kids play team sports, it's fun to be with friends, to get exercise. Nowhere does winning make the list. And then if you look at other studies, most kids, depending on the study you look at, kids quit team sports between 11 and 13. And at the end of the day, the reasons they quit is it's not fun anymore. And that's typically because they no longer have any ownership over the process. This became an adult-driven thing, right? They're there, the coaches are directing them what to do every minute of the game. The parents are, really invested in the results for whatever they have to talk at the water cooler at work the next day or whatever, right? And that's why kids quit sports. We know sports do all kinds of wonderful things for kids, yet we create these environments that makes them not want to play, right? So that environment and that culture is superbly important, particularly in Fellsway. That's really, it's driven purposefully for a reason. right? And there are parents that don't get it. We've released parents in the past because they just didn't get it. And we're like, listen, this is just not the place for you. And we will release you. Find somewhere else to play, we'll release you. It's not a big deal. Because if they don't get it, there's no reason us all beating our heads against the wall, trying to make them understand. Do the most good for the most people, I guess.
When I was a kid, in high school and in college age, right? My older brother Andy coached several sports at Wellesley High School, and he coached hockey. And hockey parents are famous, particularly the last 20 years, for being off their rockers and yelling and screaming. There was one guy in the rink who I won't name, but everybody who was in that little subculture remembered this guy. And he would scream at refs and scream at kids. And he was the only guy in the Babson rink who would do that. This is 30 years ago. And so he was the anomaly, right? But now it's become acceptable to scream at your 10-year-old, David, what are you doing? So we've just got to penetrate this culture and get more and more people's voices on this podcast to say, no, that's not helpful. And I would love to even get some little kids on this podcast. So you can't argue with a little kid who's on the yeah, that makes me sad when daddy yells at me, and it makes me sad when we lose. And what are we doing exactly? David, you referenced, why are we paying money to have our little kids play team sports? Is it so they win? And we can go to a barbecue and say, my 11U team is the best team in the country? Or is it so that we can teach them how to be solid, confident, resilient people and help us with the world that's clearly in trouble? We don't need more winners. We don't need, there was a guy on the Red Sox recently that signed a contract for $80 million or 100. Now, to listen to sports radio, I came across it. All I could hear is this guy, I forget who it is, but the focus is on results and money and trophies and hardware and who went to Harvard and who didn't. And if you talk to anybody on their deathbed, God forbid, none of that amounts to a row of beans. It just doesn't. It's not the way life works.
Well, recently in the Olympics, I think Megan Rapinoe said that we just weren't having fun. Right? We just weren't having fun. And that's a professional athlete, right? And at the end of the day, even she was like, it just wasn't fun.
Yeah.
And Northeastern soccer, they were saying the same things. We've got to get back. A kid says in the room, we all started playing this game because it's a game. We were having fun, and we've forgotten because we lost to Brandeis or whatever. We got to we didn't make this tournament. That's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, right. At the end of the day, it's a game.
Right. And the kids will understand that. So last fall, my girls 2010 team, and we were struggling during the season. I mean, we by the end of the season, we scored like 2 goals in the entire season. Right. And a girl had joined halfway through, and we went out to Western United Pioneers, good club, good athletic teams. And they really beat us up the first time we played them. This was our second meeting. And, it was like 2-0 or 1-0 at halftime. So I asked the kids, as Kathryn mentioned, I'm like, so how things are going? Like, what do you think? And, all the girls had been the whole season, like, we're doing really well, right? We're connecting passes, we're building out of the back. These are like 9-year-old girls, right? 10-year-old girls. And this one new girl goes, I don't think we're doing that well. And I'm like, so why? Why don't you think we're doing well? And her answer was, we haven't scored a goal. The best part of this entire story was I didn't have to say a word after this. The remaining players sitting there on the touchline were like, explained to her why none of that mattered, why we were doing the things we wanted to do to make the team better. Right. And these are, like, to be honest, these are little kids, right? They were U11 at the time. So these people tell me the kids only care about winning. They don't understand this. My own experiences, they are wrong, that the kids do understand it. They'll buy into a process of improving, being with their friends, having fun and improving. It's when they get in the car after the game that things start going a little sideways in a lot of places. Now, we have awesome parents at Fellsway, right? I think the majority of them buy into this process thing, as difficult as it is. And I had a parent one day tell me that, my daughter loves the club, love what you're doing. To be honest, it's harder on us parents to watch them lose by, a large amount the girls leave and they're, we've lost by too many goals, and the girls leave smiling because the atmosphere, because of the culture, and letting them make mistakes without getting screamed at, is a huge piece of that, right? They know if they make a mistake, they're not going to get yelled at. They don't have to go and be all sad in the back of the car because they know their parents are upset because we lost the match.
Yeah, there's two things I want to highlight there. One was just recently, you and I were sitting at a soccer tournament and we were on the sideline. Someone else was coaching, so we were kind of observing. And the coach of the other team for, what was it, like a 2011 boys team?
It was like 77, so it was like 2012, I think.
Screaming his head off, screaming at these kids. These kids are then feeding off of that energy. You had like a 9-year-old yelling at a ref, but only after he had seen the coach yell at the ref. And then the coach yells at him for yelling at the ref, even though the coach had been doing all game. But I turned to you and I said, like, why pay someone to yell at your kids?
Yeah.
Like, how can you sit there and watch someone yell at your kids?
The best part of that story was that when the kids started doing what the coach was doing, the coach yelled at him for doing it. Which is like, we're all looking at him like, dude, like, you need to relax.
Yeah.
I mean, he was yelling at me. He was yelling at everybody. It was crazy.
There's no question in my mind, as a student of the human condition, as a clinical social worker for 40 years, that as an adult community, we've lost our way. We've lost our way. So I see this little soccer club as one little island of sanity in the middle of all this. And I'm super seriously, and I mean that 100%. And I see it as an opportunity to just grow this petri dish with these conversations.
I agree, Jeff. And I think the kids are paying the price for that, which is the worst part. It's the adults who are the ones who have messed up, and then kids are paying the price.
I've been doing this for a long time, and kids are in trouble. But if adults, if the parents, the coaches, and the teachers around a given set of grownups names this problem, and we start, putting in common sense solutions like David is doing in the soccer club, the kids will bounce back. They're going to bounce back. They're going to go home from the game smiling instead of sad because they lost. They're going to go home thinking that was fun. I learned how to stop a ball with my foot today, and I made a new friend with Michelle, and everything's beautiful.
Yeah. So like, we know all of the good things sports provides, team sports in particular, right? Community and less risky behaviors and better grades and more likely to stay in school and get further education, all of these great things. Yeah, we have a whole culture of that dissuades kids from continuing to play, right?
Yeah.
Which is bonkers.
There's one thing I want to highlight about us and talk about my own personal experience would be that we don't cut, correct?
No, we don't cut. Not every kid can make a team, whatever level it is, but we will always give them an opportunity to come in and train. And, most of these kids, people who want to cut 10-year-olds, all I say is Michael Jordan every time they say that to me. Like, why would we cut 10? We don't know what they're going to be. So we always give them an opportunity to come into the community, to get the experience of skill or strength of Jeff Levin's stuff, Kim's yoga. We're actually working on a medical piece and then an education piece to get all of those benefits and work their way into a competitive, the correct competitive level for them. We don't want to put a kid in a circumstance where they just get discouraged because they can't keep up, but we do provide them or want to provide them opportunities. And a lot of people don't take us up on those. Some people do. And usually if a kid wants to come in and train for a while, like, we can get them there if they're serious about wanting to train. And the flip side of that is that I've had these discussions with parents. I'm like, listen, if your daughter wants to come in, I can get her, by next spring ready to be part of this team, but it requires a significant amount of work and attention. And if your, son or daughter does not want to put that time in, this really isn't worth your money.
Yeah. So there's one thing I want to highlight. And for those of you listening who don't know, I played soccer essentially my whole life. I'm 20 now and just finished a U23 season. And I was on and off a bit there. A couple things. I'm very young for my grade, or I guess what used to be my grade. And I had some injuries early on. So when I was 13 in 8th grade, I decided that I was really serious about soccer. I was going into 8th grade. And so I decided I'd do what other people were doing, and I joined a club team, and it was one of the better club teams around, and I played one season for them. It was fine. I wasn't by any means the best player on the team, but that was what I had gone into it hoping for, actually, because town soccer and all that sort of stuff, I kind of struggled to find a good place for me and ended up being on lower teams that I kind of was always the best player on that team. So I went and I told my dad, I want to be on a team where I'm not the best player. And so I went and I played, had a fine season. And at the beginning of the next year, the coach told my dad that I was cut and I was done. And my dad had to tell me. And he told me, and I was devastated, but almost right away, it's like, it's fine. We're going to start looking for other ones. And sure enough, I had my first tryout that spring, and it was with Dave. And I got an offer the next day and joined the team and stuck with that club till I graduated high school. And funny enough, my senior year, I ended up on the same varsity team that a bunch of girls who were on that former club team were on. And some of them who had been on that club team didn't even make the varsity team that I was on. So the point is, it's about development, and it's about giving kids a chance to succeed and to make it to that level. But like you said, the kid has to want to do that, and you shouldn't force your kid to do that. But there needs to be more opportunities for kids, especially ones who maybe had a journey like me where they were like young for the grade, had all these injuries, had kind of a rough time. Like give them a chance to find their footing, give them a sense of security, and then you'll watch as they grow.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to help kids play because of the benefits. And the science, like the academies in Europe have this down to, they can tell you by the order of birth in the family and when, in what month and day a kid was born, where they're going to fall in that development. Let's be honest, someone born on the 1st of January in a given birth year is going to be a better player typically than the kid born on December 31st, because there's an extra year of growing and development there, right?
And especially early on.
Yeah, right. Because
so
you
by
get
high
older,
school, they kind of catch up. But if you don't give that kid a chance early on, that's where kids fall out of the system that, who knows, could have been great, but didn't get a chance.
Well, this happens all the time, right? You get some big, strong, athletic kid, and he's always the top. He's on team 1 in the town, or what, team A, whatever they call it, right? And the kid's been super athletic, but never learned to play the game. And they had this kid on the 3rd or 4th team who stuck with it and became a good technical and tactical player. And they get to high school, and that big athletic kid doesn't make varsity, and this little puny kid from 3rd grade that was, that nobody thought should be playing the game at all, is all of a sudden a star.
Yeah.
Right. And that's because the kid was given a chance to develop his skills. He wasn't using his athleticism to mask the lack of skill, which happens all the time.
Yeah, right. And something else, like that kid probably got cut from X amount of teams or whatever, but that kid had that resilience to get back up and go and try again. And that's also what parents need to make sure you're instilling in your kids. It's not all result driven. It's okay if you fail 5 times, but if you get up the 6th, that's all that matters. And I ultimately made it to my end goal and was better for it because of it.
Yeah. So we're about to enter high school tryout season here, right?
Yeah.
And I'll start getting phone calls and emails and texts that, so-and-so didn't make varsity as a freshman or as a sophomore.
Yeah.
And, it's a tough discussion to have. And I always say to them, is it better to play as a freshman on JV than be on the varsity team and never see any minutes, which is better for you?
Yeah.
Right. And those kids that go, I'm going to work harder to make varsity. They're the ones that end up being better off. And the parents support, parents think wonderful things of their children, right? And for good reason. But don't feed into, yes, you should have been on varsity. Yeah, maybe you do believe that deep down, but I believe anyhow that telling your kid that doesn't help them bounce back. I mean, I know Holly, my daughter, had at times a rather rough high school experience for a little bit. And I kept telling her, just go be the best player on JV. right? Be the player that they can't do without.
Yeah.
On JV, and that's eventually what she did. And as a senior, she was a captain, she was a league all-star, she was a Central Mass all-star, she was all-state, and ended up getting an offer to play college soccer, right? Because she just dug in and was like, okay, they don't think I can play varsity, I'm going to show them that they were wrong.
Yeah, and you have to make do of where you're at and do your best wherever you're at. And it also comes back to that whole thing of comparison.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, blah, blah, blah's in this spot and I should be in this spot instead of them. But at the end of the day, you can't always control where you're at. You can control if you do your best where you're at.
Yeah. So we won't go too far in this, but there's another culture piece of Fellsway is that, I tell parents, we talk about all the time, is that we coach players, not teams. Right. So Sally doesn't necessarily need the same thing as Joanne, who doesn't need the same things as Emily.
Yeah.
Right. They all need different things. And a good coach should be able to provide all of those things inside that team environment.
Yeah.
Which we work really hard to do. It's not easy. To be honest, it's easier to coach a team to be the best team they can be than it is to coach a bunch of individuals to be the best they can be while supporting a team.
Yeah.
But that's what we stride for. And I think in the end, the kids see that. And another thing, another little culture piece we'll throw out there is that, I tell my teams, and this is a piece we're working with the other coaches, is every kid on a team is the best at something, right? So how do we find that something, encourage that something, have that person be a good role model in that item? And that item doesn't have to be on the field. You don't have to be the best striker or the goal scorer. You could be the one that helps other kids with their math homework.
Or a vocal leader.
Yeah. Or the one that, like, when people are bummed out, you're the one that makes them motivated again.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be soccer that you're the best at. It could be something else. Like I've had, what I would consider leaders or captains on my team that weren't even close to the most skilled player, but they were the best leader.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Jeff, any final words, anything you want to add there?
Dave, I really like your straightforward, sincere, clear communication. And I can't agree with it more. I really want to emphasize, whether there's 5 people listening or 500, I'll give my contact info. My email's jeff@jefflevincoaching.com. And my number 603-496-0305. I don't know if my contact info is on the Wanderers website, but I would love to hear from any and all parents. I just want to keep this conversation going.
Yeah, please ask us any questions if you have any questions related to this episode. If you have any subjects you want us to talk about or want to come on to talk about, but you don't have to come on if you don't feel comfortable, but if there is something you want to hear about, please let us know. My contact is kathryn@fellswaywanderers.club. If you are interested in the Fellsway Wanderers Club, Dave, do you want to give that info?
Yeah. First, I want to say that if you're a club administrator of any sport, and what we do is not a secret, reach out to us. We're happy to help you implement some of the things that we do. So my email is David, David, @fellswaywanderers.club. You can email me if you have any questions about the club. I can send you to the right person. And of course, it's on the web at fellswaywanderers.club. Kathryn's always available to answer questions as well. Reach out. It doesn't have to be necessarily to join the club. If you're interested in what we do and why, ask us. I'll send you to Jeff. I'll send you to our performance people. None of this is a secret.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, for coming on. Thank you for everything that you do. I'm sure if we even get any more questions related to this stuff, I'll always drag you back on. Everyone, please follow or subscribe to this podcast. If you leave a review, that would help. If you refer a friend, that would be awesome. Just anyone that you think would be interested in that. They don't need to be in the Massachusetts area. They don't need to be in the soccer community. We just want to get this message out, as Jeff has stated. So yeah, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Kathryn.